Sorry about that. We're coming back live on the GenWell Project with Maureen Brine. Maureen, if you saw me there, I went off and came back on, so I will get you there. Hello, Yaz. Great to have you join us. I was saying there that Maureen has been on Interventions Canada for quite some time and a professional in the addiction space. It's certainly something that I think the GenWell Project is quite relevant to the addiction space. Certainly a great book and TEDx out there by Johan Hari about the importance of social connection in the lives of those who struggle with addictions. And so certainly something we want to bring to light. And it's so great that Maureen is able to join us today and to have a conversation about really what's been going on in the addiction space for a long time. I'm going to bring Maureen on now. There she is. And assuming... There she is. Coming back, Maureen, but I know that you have followed along, and that's awesome. So really looking forward to this conversation today. Maureen is such an expert, 35 years in the addiction space, somebody who really understands what this is all about. Hello, Maureen Brine.
Hello, Pete Bombachi. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see it perfectly. It's I know it's tough because are you on a phone or an iPad? What did you end up with?
I ended up on my phone because I haven't got Instagram on my iPad. Shocking, eh?
Yeah, it's been really interesting as we've gotten this thing go. Obviously, you know, everybody and his brother thinks that they're a podcaster or an Instagram live person now that we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we're all quickly learning how to do all this stuff, and some of it I'm literally set up today with Scotch tape and a holder and two lamps, and so we're all trying to make do during these challenging times.
I know it's true. It has been really challenging, you know, for many.
How was your Canada Day? Let's start off with the excitement of July 1. How was your Canada Day?
Well, given that I am a fiercely proud Canadian, I love Canada Day. And I really do feel proud, and especially now during these times, to be living here in Canada with all the wonderful support and family. And it was a good day yesterday. I'm really
That's
proud
awesome.
to be.
You know, it's interesting, and I'm sure we could touch on this as part of our conversation today. But I really, you know, because what I just mentioned, Canada Day, you know, how less Canada did it feel? Although I understand the pride, how less Canada Day did it feel because we weren't able to connect with one another?
Well, I think that certainly was present for me and for many. I'm sure yesterday young people were out there connecting anyway.
Yeah.
To, you know, go, usually I'm with a whole crowd of people and we're looking at fireworks, and, you know, instead we went out for a drive. We did fireworks. I did see the CN Tower, which was fun, you know, but it was different to not be with friends. Usually we're with friends, you know.
Yeah.
And doing something to celebrate Canada Day. So it was different.
Yeah, I think we're all, you know, I don't want to suggest that we're settling in, but, you know, we're certainly becoming used to the new normal and certainly trying to make amends or make adaptations to build those coping strategies that will get us through. So.
Well, I think that's a good word, adaptation, right? In fact, someone said to me last week that the thought of going back to work felt abnormal. They've been working, but working from home. So now to go back to the office feels abnormal, which is really right.
Yeah.
Adapted.
Mo, thank you for being here today and for being a part of Connected Conversations. What we do is we start off with a little introduction of the GenWell, what we're all about, how Connected Conversations came about, and then we'll head into you and what you do and how gracious you've been with giving us some time today. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Hey, everybody. Pete from the GenWell Project. We are a human connection movement launched in 2016 to remind people about the importance of face-to-face social connection, and more importantly, inspire them to take action. We lived in, up until 12, 13 weeks ago, the most fast-paced, distracted, and pressure-filled world in history. And most of us weren't making the time to connect with others. One of the things that's now by research shown to make us happier, healthier, more resilient, and many other mental and physical health benefits that I'm sure we'll touch on with Maureen today. Connected Conversations is a series of conversations that we launched with the onset of COVID-19 because we thought that people needed to hear about all the different people, ideas, tools, tips, suggestions, information that could help us all cope through these challenging times, not because we're struggling with mental health issue or physical health issue, but more proactively in staying healthy and taking steps and trying things out before we get into the crisis. Because although we certainly will benefit from human connection when we're in those crises, it's a great thing to stay proactive and stay healthy and happy by staying connected as well. So today we welcome Maureen Brine, who is a longtime friend of mine, but also a registered nurse, psychotherapist, and an addiction specialist. I'll read Maureen's bio because it's quite impressive. Maureen Brine is well known and highly respected specialist in the field of addiction. She's also an educator and a couples therapist, an advanced imago relationship therapist, and international addiction specialist. She has been in private practice since 1985 in both Vancouver and Toronto. She's a sought-after global speaker, workshop presenter, and trainer. Maureen has been in the addiction fields for more than 35 years. She's a former director of the Donwood Institute in Toronto. Her main focus is addictions and imago relationship therapy. She is a respected leader in her field, and many individuals, families, and organizations have benefited from her skills and understanding in the area of relationships, addictions, family systems, and recovery. Maureen O'Brien, it's absolutely amazing to have you on Connected Conversations today. Thank you for making the time.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Hey, Maureen, the first thing we do on every one of our shows, because I think it's so important right now, before we get to the topic of, what we can do to help others, it's putting the oxygen mask on ourselves and checking in on the people we care about. So let me start off by saying, how are you holding up during COVID-19? And, maybe what are the challenges that you've faced as you've been going through this?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm holding up pretty well. I mean, I think I have some struggles like people. As things are opening up, it feels better. I think the way that I have been able to cope with this is not to go too far out, not to go too far into the future. So truly living in the present moment, taking each day as it comes, and not anxious about what lies ahead because nobody knows.
Yeah.
My dad once gave me a poem that said, let us not look back in anger, forward in fear, but around in awareness, right? And so I think that is in fact how I've been living each day, one day at a time. It's what I ask a lot of my clients to do, and I've been living that for sure. I have appreciated that I have had Zoom parties. I have had, one of my friends is single, and when we're really in hardcore lockdown, we had a FaceTime every single night because she was on her own.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing, and I guess I don't know if you know this, Pete, but my brother-in-law Richard died from COVID.
I did know that.
Yeah, and I think that by far was the hardest thing, and probably a time that I felt like I came undone myself, where the thought of him being alone in intensive care with his wife, his sons, not able to go in, no one was able to go in and see him or hold his hand or be with him. His brother, that really broke me up. And to think about all the people that have been sick with this and in intensive care, not have their loved ones, that's tough because, as you know, I think we help to regulate each other's anxiety. People that we love, that love us, when we're in those palliative care situations or we're in a crisis like that, to have a loved one or a close person in close proximity to you actually regulates your anxiety, blood pressure, your heart rate. So to think of him dying by himself, that still makes me incredibly sad.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of conversation about grieving in isolation, and your brother-in-law is one of probably 10 now. 1 degree of separation. People that I know have lost a loved one, COVID and non-COVID. I don't think it was COVID for him, was it?
Yes, it was.
It
Yeah.
was COVID. And I just think we're all trying to find, like, I've heard the drive-by funerals, I've heard of the virtual things, but I think, and I know there's research on this as well, just human touch, anytime, but especially in those times, that opportunity to hug, to hold, to touch, to hold a hand, to not only while they're going through that experience, but also for those that are grieving after they're gone. I think I think it's we're waking up to just how important that is now.
Connection. And I think, yeah, my sister-in-law, of course, she had it as well, and she was isolated, and so no one could go to her. So she was 6 weeks before anybody could even, so yeah. And a shout out to the healthcare workers, because I think they absolutely did the best they could to be with people when they were dying from this and holding their hand. And, we did the best we could, given the situation.
Yeah, it's amazing what everybody on the front line. I again, watching CBC News last night, there was a lady, a nurse from the military, who's working in a seniors home, and talking about just that, the role they have to play just to be there as the conduit to family, as the replacement, if there's such a thing. But you know, it will be a struggle, again, and this is what we're here to talk about is, there's the struggles of getting through this, and then there's going to be the struggles on the other side of this, which, in my humble opinion, will probably even be greater than the actual health challenges that we're facing now, because it's, financial pressures, job, whether you have one and you're working too much, you don't have one and you're struggling to pay bills, you're trying to take up 10 hours a day of your normal life, and you're like, what was this all about? Because this is not the norm. And so lots of things. I'll just say, a friend of mine, Yaz Mazir, who works at the Canadian Cancer Society now, who knows all about supporting people through challenging times, I just mentioned that rituals are meaningful. And I think we are all, that I don't know if you can call it a ritual of death, but we understand that, grieving and being there at end of life is so important. I don't know if people recognize how important, Mo, but I think now that it's not there and you're not able to do it, we now recognize in ourselves what we miss.
I think there's a whole new understanding about our funeral rituals are there for a reason, right? That we get to actually say goodbye to people, and not to be able to do that, I think, has made it much harder on folks. I think too, the impact of, as you're saying, life, it is we have a whole new normal. And I was reading the other day too about the impact on children, and that we forget that even little kids are deeply by this because they're not able to socialize, and
Yeah.
that's a mental process. So
I know that we have Leanne Cohen. Oh my God, I'm the head of the Big Brothers Big Sisters, and her comment in a video that we just shared again the other day was about brain development in young kids and socializing being critical in that development. And so again, this is part of the message of the GenWell Project, is none of us were ever educated on this stuff. We didn't realize how important social connection was. And frankly, it's because up until the early 2000s, we didn't have to worry about it. There was always kids on the street. There was always parents cutting grass. There was always people washing their car and sitting on their front porch. And now none of that happens. Somebody else cuts the grass. Somebody else, you get your car wash done at the local car wash. And we now have back decks surrounded by tall fences. So, everything that we've created is now the isolation and loneliness that we're waking up to. And because we don't recognize that maybe it's contributing to some of the challenges that we're facing in our lives, that's what we're here to do, is just raise that consciousness.
well, I'm really impressed that you're doing it, actually, and it's, as you know, it's right up my alley, because I don't just work with addictions, but I do relationship therapy where all the time, looking at the quality of the connection between two people or a family or, friends even. Um, that's where it's at. It's all about.
It is so funny, and we'll go a little deeper now, but it is so funny to me that this really for me came to light when I looked in hindsight at 25 years in alcohol and 20 years in alcohol and 5 years in running a men's health charity, and seeing how people were their happiest not when they were drinking, because I always jokingly say if you went to a bar and there was nobody there, even half price drinks wouldn't keep you there. The reason people went to the bar at happy hour was because they knew other people were going to be there. That was what made them happy. And
Right.
so whether it was Movember or whether it was during my days in the beverage alcohol industry, what I recognize is people were their happiest when they were around other people. And it just kind of something was special there. And then when I did the research, it's like, holy cow, how come none of us know about this? So,
Well, we're wired to, our brains are wired to, right?
yeah.
Protect against pain. So that has a lot to do with addictions as well. But I mean, I think, what you're saying is perfectly accurate. 12-step programs, AA, NA, all of the 12-step programs have known for 75 years that people need to give up the addiction and return to people, right? Because as an addiction develops, people become more and more isolated. So I think they've always had it right, and treatment centers have picked up on that the addiction needs to be replaced with people, right?
It's so unfortunate for me when I hear that, Mo, because I kind of, again, I go back to my comment about none of us were ever educated on this because it used to just happen naturally.
Right.
It's almost like we had to force people to go through the crisis
Yeah.
before they had to discover this through a 12-step process, addiction process, or going into some type of a crisis, a counselor, a therapist, a coach, whatever. You had to hit the bottom before somebody would say to you, hey, how much have you invested in your relationships with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues? And that was the awakening, which I think is, and again, this is what we're trying to do with the GenWell, which is let's stop waiting until people are sick before we actually try to help them.
I'm on the same path as you. I mean, as you mentioned, I don't think you mentioned the show, but I will, that I am the featured intervention on the A&E show Intervention. And it started out with Intervention Canada, and now we're part of the North American group of.
Oh, okay.
And by the way, they're releasing about 12 of our shows on A&E July and August, and they're the Canadian.
Do you know what night? What
I have a Tuesday nights.
Okay.
Probably write that into you, but when I was first asked to do that show, Pete, I declined because I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they were doing. A lot of people don't agree about interventions, but the whole purpose of an intervention is not to wait until someone hits rock bottom. Because as we sat back in the 80s and 90s and waited for someone to hit rock bottom, many people died. Their rock bottom was death. And so the whole point of an intervention is with love is to pull them out of that rabbit hole and offer them the opportunity to connect with the people that love them, and to get the help they need. So eventually, one of my colleagues said to me, seriously, Maureen, do you have any idea how many people this will reach out and touch and help? Why are you not doing this? So anyway, I agreed to do it, and that was like 7 seasons ago or something like that, maybe 10 years ago.
Mo, that is so, again, what I think the reason I ended up doing this is because I knew that having purpose in my life every day was something I needed to wake up with. You must be you must inspire yourself because, to know the impact that you're having, not only on the individual that you're helping, but on the people that are watching and maybe getting some tips and ideas on what they might be able to do is pretty powerful.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Mo, talk to me. So 35 years, and we'll go through the past quickly because I think we've got a lot to talk about what's happening right now. But I think really what I wanted to touch on was kind of like what has happened in addictions. Let's say in the last 10 years, Has it been growing, declining? What areas are growing? What's declining? What are the areas that are really causing people struggles? And everybody's struggle is equal. So it's not that some issues are bigger or worse, or, they're all issues. But, how would you describe what the trend has been in the last decade or so?
I can sort of quickly say over the last 35 years, when I first got the field, it was pretty common, like at the Donwood, for example, which is now Bellwood, Edgewood. Someone would be an alcoholic or a drug addict. It was very rare, sort of getting into the 80s, where people were both, where they were cross-addicted. Now it would be a very rare thing to just get alcoholic without any other concurrent disorders or any other drug use. So I think, and I know there are people out there, if they're listening, that will agree with me, we have a pandemic in the field of drug abuse. And I'm going to talk about opiate addiction, because that by far, and not just Canada, but North America and around the world, has been the fastest rising problem. Right? And then if you add on top of that it's now getting harder and harder to get opiates, right? People are going from opiates to heroin and, drugs like that. So it is scary, Pete. On the show, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, these young people who get hooked on drugs are their own pharmacies. They know more about drugs, drug interaction, than I could ever possibly want to know, right? And they become addicted quickly, and life goes spinning out of control quickly, And a lot of them, we don't have enough resources. We have not got enough resources in Canada to deal with what we've got here, And if you can't afford to pay for treatment, well, you're in a long lineup, right? And a lot of these kids have nothing. A lot of these young people have the resources.
So
That's why we have so much homelessness. So many young people in jail because they have to do what they have to do to get the money to do what they want to do.
So let me ask you this question, and it's really two questions. It's again, I just believe that in the last 3-4 decades, we've created the most individualistic society in history. Even though we were living in the greatest growth era in the history of the world, we forgot that we needed each other, and we forgot the role that we played in each other's lives from a social responsibility perspective to be there for somebody else. And when you saw them, going down an unfortunate path, that you might actually stop them before they took the road or went further down the path. So it's twofold. Number one is, I don't know, is there a common theme of what tends to take somebody into opioid addiction or addiction in general? Is it some type of crisis? And then B, what role do you think the rest of us could play? Because and I will tell you this, John Tory, who shot some videos for us about 1.5 years ago, said to me as part of the conversation we were having, we can no longer keep waiting until people are in crisis, because to your point, the system is, chock-a-block of people. We're running out of the money. Government can't afford to wait to fix everybody at the end. So what role do we all take, and what responsibility do we all have in stepping up and helping people before they get into that? So what is it that leads to it? And could we, as human beings, be there for each other more in a better way to help prevent more addiction, more struggles for people out there?
Well, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense about living in an individualistic society, let's say. One of the biggest factors that I can see, Pete, is not staying together, right? The family of origin breaking up, kids being torn between two parents. When you look at, as long as I have, at people's history, you can see that loss of connection, that loss of a solid familial base does not help. So I would say there are a number of predisposing factors. I mean, they're numerous, but that loss of connection, that loss of a solid, secure childhood, coming from broken homes, people start using for many reasons. Mostly they start using to quell their own anxiety. So whatever is in their life that is creating anxiety for them, whether they've got ADD and learning disabilities, or there's a myriad of things. Some people start to use because they're in pain, and they start to use legitimately, but then they discover that they like the feeling, right? So I think that if you are concerned about someone, then you need to speak up, from a place of love, to say, I'm concerned about your drinking, or I'm concerned about your pot. A lot of kids, I have mixed feelings about having pot legalized. I mean, some kids will try pot, their first drug usually, and some kids will just try it and use it for a while and walk away from it. Then there's a whole other group of kids who use it daily, whose life starts to go down the toilet because they're demotivated, who move from pot onto other things. And I don't think that my son would mind me outing him, but he never drank during his teenage years. We adopted him when he was 7. He didn't drink as a teenager, he smoked weed, right? And then, he when he did find alcohol, it agreed with him. And then he found painkillers, and then he moved on to opiates, and when he couldn't get those, he moved on to heroin, right? So he's been clean for 3 years now, and he is a joyful, happy human being, right? And thank God. I feel blessed, and so does he, So there are many reasons that people become more and more isolated, which is a problem. And Johari, and that video I really like that video. What is addiction really? Where he says we're doing the absolute wrong thing. We're isolating people from their family, right? And that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety; it's connection. And connection to oneself, but also connection to the people around you that love you. And even if you don't have anyone left, it's connection to your AA group or your NA group, or whatever community you are a part of. But we need connection. I mean, I think his greatest joy, my son says, that he has his family back.
Yeah,
he has his family back, and he never misses a family function because for many years he couldn't be there. He was too sick.
It's funny. I often talk about, again, if you were lucky in the last 4 or 5 decades, you grew up in a family that really valued that time. And again, I don't think anybody really understood the research. And frankly, I don't think a lot of the research existed. You had Maslow's hierarchy and other psychologists who had suggested that, love and belonging was important, but now the research validates that it's, reduces anxiety and depression, increases empathy, compassion, resilience, strengthens your immune system, your self-confidence, increases your chances of living longer. And yet none of us know this information. And if we did, I think people would value that time with family. And I think this is what's happening. The silver lining of the pandemic is that we're actually waking up and going, wow, like, I'm actually spending time with my kids, my families, even my extended family or my neighbors or whomever. And that's our message. And we'd really love to do everything we can to get this message out there, because if we can get people to recognize it while they're in the middle of a pandemic, wow, I miss people. Hey, did you also know how important it was for you? Hey, so when we get back, let's not go back to the old ways.
Well, that's a really important point, is that I think that has happened for a lot of people. They are recognizing how important connection is to their loved ones, right? And I think the other thing, Pete, and this ties into that, is that in the I think late 80s, maybe, a lot of research started coming out of the Stone Center in Boston about attachment issues. And so now we know much more about how important the attachment stage in childhood is. That's the first 18 months of life, right?
Yeah.
And how important that is for setting us up to be relational for the rest of our lives, right? 60% of North American people have attachment wounds. And that is another reason why there are so many addictions, because, unfortunately, you can alter yourself to feel more connected. It doesn't last and it's not real. But, yeah, and again, going back to families, right? And think about working parents who have kids like at 6 weeks to daycare. I mean, sometimes life gets in the way, but people grow up with attachment issues.
I think that's the other challenge that, over the last 30 to 40 years, we may say we've become more disconnected, and, we may want to look to say, hey, well, how come you didn't do it? But we have more two-income families, and now, there's nobody at home and my mom was at home when I came home at the end of the day. And I did have somebody, a professional, say to me, the power of having somebody after a bad day at school, for you to walk home and say, Mom, Jimmy punched me, or somebody stole my lunch, or Susie said she didn't like me. And those are pretty challenging emotions. And frankly, it's no different when you had a failure at the office and your wife or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever it is,
Right.
having that community around you who can support you through the daily ups and downs that we all go through is so critical. But again, I'm not sure that most of us recognize it until we get into the crisis.
Right, that's true. And I work with Harville Hendricks. I think I mentioned you before. He's the founder, wife Helen McKelly Hunt, of Imago Relationship Therapy.
Yeah.
If you don't have connection, you have anxiety, right? And if you have anxiety, you can bet your bit that you're going to find a way to regulate that. So you're right. For you to be able to go home to your mom and say, "This is what happened to me," and to have someone listen to you, right, was a regulator for you. And a lot of people don't have that. If they don't have connection, have anxiety, right? Which is why GenWell Project is so important. That you're starting a social movement, and I would like to look at his stuff too. He's got a whole program in Dallas called Safe Connections that might be really interesting for you to look at. But we need each other. We're wired for it. And if we don't have it, we're dysregulated.
Yeah, I so appreciate your comments, Mo, and I hope that, having experts like yourself, from the addiction space, we've got people from poverty, we've got people from cancer like Yaz, who was on. I don't know if he's still on. It doesn't matter what challenge you're going through in life.
No.
Having that community around you to support you through it is critical to get out the other side in the best healthy and happy way possible.
That's for sure. Yeah.
So Mo, we talked a little bit, opioid crisis going through the roof. We know Vancouver certainly was having lots of challenges. I know we were having many challenges in Toronto. I'm assuming it's coast to coast. It's everywhere because easy accessibility is part of the challenge with the crisis.
Right.
So now along comes this pandemic called COVID-19. And so what's going on in the addiction space? What's going on for the individual who's struggling right now, as we've been isolated and isolated even more than we were? And what kind of impact is that having? And how do you think people are coping? How are we handling it?
Impact on anyone who's in recovery, right? I mean, many people have relapsed during this COVID time that might not have, because suddenly they're forced back again into isolation, and so there have been many in these number of months where people have proverbially fallen off the wagon with their drugs or alcohol. And I think the other thing too, even people that don't have addictions, are people are laughing saying, yeah, COVID-19, I've gained weight, or I'm drinking more, right? Because they can, right? You got your hand up. Yeah, and so it's like, but for certain in the recovery field, it's had a. Now, I will say that 12-step programs and actually treatment centers, a lot more outpatient going on now than ever before. I was talking to the directors of a treatment center. He said their outpatient program has just gone bananas, right, online. So 12-step programs are now online, 24 hours a day, and a lot of people are availing themselves of that and enjoying it, because now they're not just connecting with their local Toronto group, they're connecting with someone in England or, all over the world. And it's not quite the same connecting this way, but it's helping. It does help.
Yeah, and I think that's the powerful thing. And I've got a couple examples. First off, the GenWell Project was always about human connection and finding the balance with technology. But there's nothing wrong with using technology as a great way to supplement the relationships that we will get back to, because they are more meaningful when they're face to face. But I was speaking with the folks at WW, formerly known as Weight Watchers, and I did a presentation to the organization in Canada about human connection and the role it plays in keeping people happier and healthier. And they too, because I guess there's a lot of similarities there in the sense that, you know, they went from only in person to all online, and I'm sure there'll be a happy medium in the middle. And I talked to some folks in the family and childcare mental health space at the George Hull Center in Etobicoke, and they too, all face-to-face now, all digital, and there'll be a happy medium. Some people will be just fine having that digital connection, maybe because they have other support networks around them.
Yeah.
But there will be some people, as you say, that will miss that human connection because that connection with their group, with their leader, with their peer may be the only connection that they have.
That's right. Yeah, so I mean, I urge people who are in recovery to reach out and use those online programs. And, you know, there are lots of counselors, therapists, coaches, all working online now. So, you know, you just have to access them, you know.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, initially, I think there was probably a little pushback by people my age who probably pushed back and said, I don't want to do digital. This will be over in a week or two. And now that we're 12 weeks into it, I think in lots of different things, from, you know, pushing on to go learn something new in a class, by getting support in recovery, by, you know, coping with whatever struggle it is. I think we're all starting to come to grips with the fact that we better get comfortable with Zoom and FaceTime and other things, because it may be the only option for the time being.
Yeah. You know, it's been interesting for me. We were away for the month of February, and I worked online. So I just came right back into this and just continued online. I find I focus more online.
Really?
Even though you're not right here in front of me in person, there's something about the way I focus online which is different than when I'm in person. You know, I'm actually enjoying it, and it's been interesting meeting new people that I've never met, and on they come. I work with a lot of couples.
Yeah.
You know, getting to know them that way. I've even been teaching groups online, so it's the next best thing. It's not perfect, but it's the next best thing.
It's funny. I feel the same. I wrote an article that said the title of the article was permission, excuse, and purpose. We've been given the permission to use digital technology now. We have a purpose to reach out, or an excuse to reach out, which is COVID. And what we all need to recognize, oftentimes we connect giving to a financial contribution to something. But right now, I think one of the greatest gifts we can give each other is just by outreach, by calling up somebody and saying, hey, how you doing? How you holding up? What's going on? You know, how's the family? You know, and to your point about focusing, I've enjoyed all those things that you just mentioned. And I think the difference, the only thing I've seen and heard is, as you know, I've got a young guy. He's 6 years old, just turning 6. And, you know, I know that trying to focus when somebody's going to the fridge and to the snack cupboard every 10 minutes becomes a bit of a challenge. And I can't imagine if I had 2 or 3 or 4 of those.
Oh, that's hard.
What a crazy time that would be.
Yeah, that's difficult when you haven't got the kind of privacy that you might have in your office. Yeah, I'll be sometimes talking to someone and Scott will, you know, slam the fridge door. It's like, oh, geez, you know, yeah.
But I think, you know, this is the other silver lining of, hey, we're all human, you know, we all have people around us, fridges, you know, stoves, kids, toys, you know, the postman knocking at the door, FedEx is coming, Amazon's delivering another parcel. Hold on 1 second, I got to go get that door, you know, so we're all in, and I think that's the power as well, Mo, is, and this is where I hope we all come out the other side. And the power in this is that we are all living through this together. Because even in the pandemic, not the pandemic, in the crash of 2008, only those who were invested in the stock market or who jobs in, you know, those financial industries that were impacted, only they really, the rest of the world went on, which is probably 50% or greater of the world who just went on and lived their lives.
Yeah.
And I think the difference with this one is we truly are in this together, even though we may be experiencing it differently.
That's very true. I think there's a lot to be said that, Pete, that we're all experiencing. It's not just happening to me or to you. It's to all of us. And we're all trying to find ways to cope. I mean, I this time to reach out to people I don't normally have to talk to. I made a list. I made 2 lists of people,
I love it.
and crossing people off of people I want to connect with. I've had, and I think encouraging people to have dinner dates over online, to reach out to people that maybe you lost connection with.
There was just a piece of research came out. I don't know if it was a recent research or it was just highlighted by Dr. Vivek Murthy out of the US, that 90% of the time when you reconnect with somebody from your past, it ends up in a positive experience. They appreciated it. You appreciated it. Everybody walked away with a positive experience. And I think that might be because we all get to that period of time. Maybe even you and I might have been there, except I ran into Jer and had a coffee with them. The reality is we get past a psychological barrier that if I haven't seen Mo in, more than 3 months, then I can't talk to Mo. She must be too busy to talk to me. So, I'm sure she's got things and she wouldn't like to hear from me. And the reality is, no, that's probably not the case.
I'm thrilled that we actually connected. You were one of my favorite kids. Look at you now.
Some things haven't changed, the chubby cheeks and all those other things, but
You were
so what I'd love to, one last thing before we let you go, because we're getting near the end, is, I don't know if it's 2 tips, 3 tips, 5 tips, and I think your comment, because I've put on 15 pounds in 12 weeks, so that's not looking so good. And I know that year over year sales in the alcohol industry, as I had heard in April, were up 150%. So people are drinking more.
Yeah.
People are putting on weight. Not everybody, but what are your tips for managing, the challenges that people are facing as we continue on in these COVID-19 times?
Well, I think what you're commenting on is important. Again, it's like, but to, rather than using things to alter the way we feel, to reach out to love. Also, not to be too hard on yourself. I mean, I don't think no one, we couldn't have predicted what this would do. So I know, like, I can't go to the gym, so I've had to do other things in order to try and maintain my physical fitness. So to get outside with someone, to, bike ride, do whatever you can physically, but most of all, have human connection. Reach out, and stay in touch with the people that you care about. And to be mindful, I think probably a lot of people have overdone it with food and alcohol. To be mindful, to try and find some balance. I think it's going to be easier now that we're in phase 2. That the weather's nice. In some ways, it's harder because you just go back to normal. But the fact that we can go outside and do more outside. The other thing is, I'm a huge believer in appreciating someone every day. Like, to give appreciation to people you love every single day. To not take anything for granted, right? And to live in the present.
Yeah.
Presence in the present.
All powerful suggestions. And, of course, as a human connection movement, that's one of the messages we always want to make sure people hear. But I think, even Dr. Robert Waldinger down at Harvard, who leads the happiness study, had a kitchen roundtable. And the first roundtable he did, which I tuned into, one of the things I think he used it was odd coming from a gentleman who's been managing that program for so long, but he said, we need to hashtag cut ourselves some slack. And I think we all need to take it easy on each other and ourselves, because it is a challenging time.
Yeah. And I'd love to come back sometime and talk to you about relationships, about partnerships, couples, because I do our world in Imago is to heal the relationship.
Uh-oh, Mo, I think we lost you. We lost you for a second. You said
Okay.
Imago was, the approach was?
Our mission in Imago is to heal the world one relationship, which fits in so beautifully with what you're doing, right? And if I feel connected in my relationship, we're both going to go out there and give it to other people, right? We're both going to go out there and give it to other people. So it's like paying it forward. It's the pay it forward program.
Yeah.
Create connection at home and take it out into the world.
Yeah, and our tagline is making the world a happier place, one face-to-face conversation at a time. So I think we are right on top of each
We're
other, which is awesome.
kissing cousins.
Hey Mo, so my last question to every guest we've had on the show in the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it is now, is, hey, when this is all over, when you can get back outside and you can see the people that you want to see and be the person you want to be, what's the first thing that you're going to want to do?
Hug everybody.
Yeah.
I want to be able to hug my family. Those outside of my bubble. I'm going to hug everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest in hugs and kisses and high fives and fist pumps. And, my wife has to actually tell me, as I get closer to my buddies, she has to like say, hey, 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 stop it, step back, step back.
Exactly.
It's just so intuitive for me to give people hugs, and to not be able to do it is really, it really sucks.
Yeah, so that's what I would say. I'm going to hug everybody. And I watched this little Facebook video last week of two little cousins. I don't know if you saw it. You should try and find it. His name is Huckley. Huckley Collins. And so he's about 5 or 6 years old, and he's somewhere around the world. And now he's approaching his little girl cousin, and his mom says, "It's okay. You can go ahead. You can hug her." And the two of them hugged each other. And then he started to wail at the top of his lungs. He just clung onto her, and they both cried, and I cried too. It's where it's at. It's we all have that in us, that we want that kind of close connection, and that we don't thrive well when we don't have.
Well, Mo, I don't think I need to say anything else. Those are powerful words and powerful insight for us all to recognize, and I think we are all recognizing as we go through this experience. So I want to say thank you, my friend, for taking the time, and I'd love to have you back to do a show on relationships, because I think there are a lot of people struggling. I know that in China, divorce rates went up during their lockdown period. I know we had the women's abuse hotline on, our support line. So whether it's violence, whether it's separation and divorce, there's lots of challenges out there right now, and I think it'd be a great topic to touch on.
Well, I'm in. So anytime, Pete. It's great. Thank you for including me.
Thank you, Mo. Great to see you, my friend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as we like to say, stay connected.
Okay, stay connected. I will. Bye.
All right, bye for now.
Bye for now.